Disclaimer. Please forgive me now if there are any mispronunciations in this video. Demonic possession involves the belief that an alien spirit, demon, or entity controls a person's actions. It was 1952 in a seaside town of Essex, England, when Bill Ramsey, 9 years old at the time, was playing out in his garden in his backyard when he felt a sudden burst of coldness surround him, as if he had walked through a frigid meat locker. He would describe it later as if he just stepped into another dimension, some unearthly place with a terrible foul odor that made him feel nauseous. All he could think about was a pack of wolves and the ocean waves crashing against the sand, and that's when he began to perceive himself as a wolf, and suddenly felt a monstrous rage. To his parents' horror, their little boy began to growl and snap his teeth. He pulled a large fence out of the ground as if it were a stick, and tore out the wire fencing with his teeth, pulling it free from the posts. He swung the fence around with ease. His parents tried to take the posts away, but were unable to pry it from his grip. Ramsey's behavior frightened his parents, who then fled toward the house when he began to growl and snarl as he placed the metal wire of the fence in his mouth, gnawing on it like an animal. And suddenly, the incident was over. His parents tended to the bleeding wounds on his lips and his mouth, left by his attempts to tear the fence with his teeth. They firmly instructed that none of them should ever discuss the incident again. 15 years would go by without incident. Bill was now a man with a wife and children. But during the first 2 years of his marriage, Bill would have the same nightmare over and over again. What he dreamed about was that he was walking peacefully behind his wife when she suddenly turned around, looked at him, screamed, and ran away in terror. It was in 1967 when the dreams ended. 19 months later, Bill woke to the sound of what he thought was the panting of a wild animal somewhere inside the room. He learned it was himself making the noises. By 1983, Bill was spending time with some of his friends in a pub when he started to feel the same icy chills he felt when he was 9. He excused himself to the bathroom, looked himself in the mirror, and saw a wolf staring back at him. He returned to the table and told his friends he wasn't feeling well, so everyone decided to go home. On his way back home, Bill started growling uncontrollably and attacked his friend by biting his leg. So they pulled over and struggled to pull Bill out of the car, describing him as having superhuman strength. They also said his hands looked like claws. Eventually they were able to get him out of the car and sat him down on the curb until he calmed down. On 1983 December 5th, Ramsey was heading for his second job with a taxi cab company when he felt a severe pain in his chest. He tried to get his breathing under control, but the pain only got worse. He ended up in the emergency room at Southend Hospital. While clutching his chest, feeling disoriented and in awful pain, the image of a wolf kept reoccurring in his thoughts. 2 nurses were pushing him on a gurney when Ramsey began to growl and roar, his hands curling into paw-like claws. He then bit one of the nurses just below the elbow. When police arrived, Ramsey was crouched in a corner, growling like a wolf and holding 2 nurses hostage. An officer tried to intervene, but Ramsey attacked him, trying to bite his arm, growling fiercely. After an intense struggle, the policeman and an intern managed to force Ramsey onto a gurney and restrain him with straps until a doctor arrived to inject him with Thorazine, which is an antipsychotic. They transported him to Runwell Mental Hospital, where he regained consciousness, at which he didn't remember what he had done. However, since he was voluntarily patient, he was fully able to check himself out. January 1984. Bill was visiting his mother when he felt an attack coming on. He made it to the same hospital on the same terms of his previous visit. The attending nurse was left alone in the emergency room with Ramsey and feared for her life. Once she told Ramsey that she was going to find a doctor, Ramsey threw to one side and lunged for an orderly. 4 police officers entered the hospital and immediately had a standoff with Ramsey, who began snarling and growling at the 4. The policeman advanced on Ramsey, at which he defended himself. One of the police officers suffered wounds so severe that he ended up in the hospital for 4 days. All four managed to handcuff Ramsey. The walk to the squad car went without incident, and Ramsey had apparently regained his faculties. Once at the station, Ramsey considered checking himself into a mental institution, but decided against it. In July 22nd, 1987, Bill Ramsey picked up a teenage prostitute to make a citizen's arrest. On his way to the Southend police station, he started to feel the episodes occur again. When they arrived, the prostitute fled into the police station in fear. Bill Ramsey demanded the officers that came out to check out the situation to please lock him up for the safety of the public. The officers found no criminal history on Bill Ramsey and so were reluctant to arrest him for no real reason. That's when Bill Ramsey began to growl and snarl like a rabid animal at Duty Sergeant Terry Fisher. Bill then grabbed Fisher by the throat, hoisted him in the air, and launched him across the parking lot. Another officer was scratched during the altercation, and it took 6 men to finally subdue and restrain Bill. Now safely locked up in a cell, the officers suddenly hear a loud bang coming from within the cell. Bill had smashed through the reinforced hatch in his cell door, with his head and arms sticking out. The fire brigade had to be called to cut Bill out from the cell door. Within the next 10 days, MRIs, x-rays, and psychiatric tests could not determine what made Ramsey's episode to occur. While at Runway Hospital and under evaluation, Ramsey was unable to remember any of the night's events. The doctors could only assume that he suffered from a mental illness known as clinical lycanthropy. After media coverage of the incident dubbed Ramsey as a werewolf of Southend, the famous paranormal investigators, the Warrens, would get involved. After seeing an American documentary covering Ramsey's case, Lorraine came to the conclusion that it must be a demonic possession. After getting in contact with Ramsey and the proper authorities, the Warrens suggested that they arrange an exorcism for Ramsey with Bishop Robert McKenna, their specialist in cleric who performed more than 50 exorcisms. The People, a London newspaper, would provide the fares for Bill and Nina Ramsey to fly to the United States, accompanied by David Alford and John Cleve, a writer and photographer from their staff. The night before the exorcism, Ramsey had another attack and tried strangling his wife while she slept. The exorcism consisted of Bishop Robert McKenna, the Warrens, 2 journalists, and 4 off-duty policemen who were hired by the bishop to defend him from the werewolves' violent attacks. The first 30 minutes of the exorcism was uneventful, but then, when the bishop placed his crucifix against Ramsey's forehead, the werewolf inside him went berserk. He came up from his chair, snarling and growling at the bishop. The bishop had no choice but to retreat beyond the altar gate. Ramsey spittled, flying from his mouth, eyes wild, began to rush through the gate. But the priest stood absolutely still now, holding his cross up once again and beginning to speak in Latin. Ramsey felt suddenly weak. He felt his desire to attack the bishop began to fade. The werewolf's power was slipping quickly away. A faint roar sounded in Ramsey's chest, then faded. He brought up his hands, but they were no longer claw-like. They were merely hands. Bill Ramsey last appeared in public in 1992 to update his progress. Since the time of the exorcism, there have been no incidents recorded. What do you think? Did you like this video? Want to support this channel? Feel free to check out my Patreon page where I create content on cryptids, hauntings, alien abductions, serious killers, and much more. Can't support me there? Like, comment, and subscribe here.